It looks like he's back. Did your internet poo-poo itself?
Yeah, I just did a 2 hour show, and then of course it pops out right before here, talking to the freaking man, the man I love talking college football with, even when we disagree on topics more than anything else, man. Blake, it's good to be with you. It's finally tackle football week, man. Let's freaking go.
That
Huh?
is true.
Huh? Huh?
Can you turn your phone sideways for me? Mega pause.
Oh,
See what it does. Does it change the
I
camera
don't think it
angle?
did anything. Hold on.
Didn't change the camera angle?
Let me see. Let's see if it does now. How about that?
There we go. There we go. All right. Carter the Barrel Bryant joining us. Carter, when you look at this game, I know it's finally game week here. What are your thoughts going into this one? How do you see this one taking place? What do you think is going to happen between LSU and Clemson?
Yeah, Blake, let's start with your third down stat. This has been a problem during the Brian Kelly era. You go back to the very first season opening game. Why did LSU lose to Florida State? Everyone points to what? Special teams and all the chaos that happened there. But Blake, you said it at the time. Our third down defense in that game was horrendous. You couldn't get off the field. And that's been a problem for LSU since then, right? It's plagued all of Brian Kelly's teams. So, can you get off the field on third down? Look, Blake, the team that we all point to for having the blueprint of beating Clemson was South Carolina. Their defensive tackles were unfreaking believably good in that game. They did a good job of limiting Phil Maffa in that rushing attack. And I'm tired of Clemson fans reminding us over and over and over again, well, did you know Phil Maffa was hurt? Blake, it's tackle football. Players get hurt. Okay, the bottom line is Clemson just could not run the ball at all versus that South Carolina defense. And that's because their defensive tackles played one of the best games I've ever seen from a group of SEC defensive tackles. And that's what LSU's DTs are going to have to do because a guy like Cade Klubnik, while he did have some big runs in that game, both of their red zone touchdowns in that game were Cade runs, they did a good job of stopping everything else. And the one thing when you really look at the throws that Cade completed in that game and some of the other games that they had, they were high level throws. They were balls where their receivers were making ridiculously tough jump ball types of catches. And all I ask the LSU defense is to make it competitive, right? On reps, make it difficult, make them have to break tackles, make them have to juke two or three different guys. And the clip that I keep going back to, Blake, from that game was when South Carolina, they had three really good defensive tackles, but really it was their fourth defensive tackle, number 95. Don't know his name. I looked up his PFF grades, Blake. They weren't really all that great, but he made one of the biggest plays of the game, hustling his ass off to run down a screen by Bryant Wesco in that game. Like I just want to see this LSU defense playing with their hair on fire, chasing Clemson down and making life difficult for them because when you do that, they will crack under pressure.
Is there anything specific area that you think Clemson is deficient?
Yeah, I think their offensive line, when they played the better defensive lines, struggled. And that isn't any kind of big revolutionary thing. Normally, offensive lines, when they play the better defensive lines, do struggle, right? But I think you and I are both high on really high on Jack Pyburn. There's been a lot of Gabriel Relaford's team recently, Blake, out of LSU's camp, and
Not
I've got
recently.
no.
He was my spring player of the year.
Right. You've been really high on him, and
Yeah.
I have been as well. I have been as well. I have a great relationship with his father. He is really starting to show out. And man, he made so many big plays last year in the limited action that he actually got. He had the first huge pressure on Jackson Dart in that LSU Ole Miss game from last year. So if this defensive end group, along with Patrick Payton, who of course is more familiar with Clemson than basically anybody on this team, if those guys are who we think they are, I think they actually match up pretty well versus Tristan Lee and the rest of this offensive line. And I understand that a lot of people are really high on this Clemson line because they do return so many snaps from last year. But I do strongly believe that LSU's defensive end room could have a massive day. But it goes back to the defensive tackles. We've heard Bernard Gooden's name, Dominic McKinley getting some national pub on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. And you hear Brian Kelly talk about him. We've heard Jack Pyburn talk about him. Um, will he be the player that we expect him to be? So as we move closer to game time, Blake, I legitimately feel this way. I feel a lot more comfortable about the LSU defensive line in this matchup, and it could be the group that wins in the game on Saturday.
I know we've talked about a lot of LSU's deficiencies. Is there one deficiency that you're worried about the most?
Yeah, obviously, like we've mentioned left guard, we've mentioned offensive line just in general. I do believe Harold Perkins will work at star this year, but it could be a tough matchup with the Clemson wide receiver group having the three wide receivers that we know that they have. There will be instances where Harold Perkins, if he is legitimately playing the
The
star
green dot.
slash the green dot, if you will, or just the
Oh, he's getting the
nickel in
green dot.
general.
He got the green dot.
So if that is the case, that means he's going to be on the field a lot. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
if if he is out in space, that's a tough matchup. It's a tough matchup for slot corners versus this wide receiver grouping. So, for me, Blake, that could be tough for LSU in some spots. But if Harold plays the way that he's been playing in practice, it could be a big day for him. So I could see that matchup in particular going either way. And one thing Clemson did do a good job of last year when they gotten their three wide receiver sets with those three wide receivers, they were really good at peppering the slot. And in particular, when they did trips on one side, they were really good at creating matchups and Cade getting the football out quickly and letting his receivers do what they do best.
Mm-hmm. Are you buying any stock from Dabo Swinney when he states that he is very high on his running back room, even though he had to move Adam Randall, the wide receiver, to running back? Because he's brought it up a lot.
Yeah, but I was high on Adam Randall just coming out, right? As a
Mm-hmm.
wide receiver, he was very physically impressive. He had the big play versus SMU on a return to win them that game, and it was big. I mean, they don't win the SMU game at the end there if he doesn't have the 40+ yard return. Where he ran with a lot of power. So this isn't your typical receiver going to running back physically. He does fit the bill, but you then worry about pass protection and all the extra things that you have a running back do. So yes, Adam Randall's team is definitely coming out of Clemson's camp, but I want to see it first. I want to see you making this drastic transition to this position. Can he actually be who the Clemson fans are hyping him up to be?
The biggest deficiency for LSU, and I wonder if Clemson tries to take advantage of this, Carter. If you can't run the ball with Adam Randall, how quickly do you get Cade Klubnik's legs involved after what you saw happen with LSU a season ago?
It's going to be everything, Blake. And here's the thing, you can have him run on you like he ran on South Carolina, and you still find a way to win the game. What you can't have, though, are these 40, 50, 60 yarders that we do know LSU has a tendency to give up, right? Look, I know I made this point a gazillion times in film studies and on your channel. I'm just going to give the most simple word that honestly goes to every single sport. Hustle matters. Okay. South Carolina, there were times where Clemson beat them, right? But they just had guys running people down. They had guys, even when they missed tackles, they were running around with their hair on fire, getting them down and forcing them to convert in the red zone. So if you do that, it can really help out this LSU defense. And one thing I will say, Blake, as far as Cade is concerned, this is an elite deep thrower. This is an elite intermediate thrower. But there are instances where there are some completable passes that Cade just flat out misses. That could definitely have put some games away for Clemson last year. So, can you force Cade to be in those third down situations where he needs to make that big crunch time pass? We'll see. Garrett in crunch time last year was pretty much money. When you needed a big throw to be completed, he was able to get it done. Cade missed a few. A big one in that South Carolina game. That was a simple slant. Then an early deep ball. Watching Bryant Wesco, who just reminds me so much of a watered down Justin Jefferson, which is a compliment. He missed him on a walk-in touchdown versus SMU that would have blown that game wide open. That miss allowed SMU to come back into the game. So I'm very excited to see what LSU defense could do to force Cade to have to convert big time in crunch time.
I think for in fairness, for both quarterbacks not making massive mistakes, I felt like in our 4 losses, turnovers were a big part of that.
Yeah.
You go on the road and you start turning the ball over, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, and that could happen. Garrett Nussmeier versus Texas A&M was a problem, right? And I do think Blake, one of Garrett's biggest things that he is superb at, it's what a lot of the NFL scouts say about him that makes him a true NFL prospect, is sack avoidance. Well, in this game, Blake, taking a few sacks might be a good thing, right? There are going to be some instances where, oh, sometimes you got to take them,
I'm just
man.
telling you what Taylor Swift's going to get tonight from Travis.
Oh, he's a hairy man. So it was a big W today for us hairy men out there. Let's go, my fellow Greeks.
Back to LSU Clemson. Continue.
But Garrett does. If we don't need the sacks. Oh God, yeah, you got me all. You
taking some sacks will be, don't turn the ball over. Let us punt the football.
Sometimes you just have to do that, right? And there are going to be instances where you just need to do that, right? Roll out to your left, don't throw against your body to a slot receiver that is very much covered, right? For me, I do think, Blake, one area where the LSU receivers will have an advantage is physicality, right? These Clemson defensive backs are not the biggest guys in the world. So some of this, Garrett is just going to need to make some of these deeper balls catchable, right? Give Trey a chance to just go up there and make a play. Give Chris a chance to go up there and make a play. As you've mentioned, deep balls that sometimes you just need to give your receiver a chance to make a play on. And if he does that, LSU should have a really good day through the air.
Clemson was 121st in the country last year at allowing first downs, and teams attacked them in the middle. I think it is play calling malpractice to not have Bauer Sharp and Trey Green have at minimum 10 targets throughout the game. I mean, look, we keep talking about all these different things that LSU was deficient in. I think the biggest thing for LSU and Joe Sloan, they better attack the middle of the football field and get down. Like, Carter, 121st in the country at allowing first downs is not a small thing. That's not – you can call it scheme all you want to. That tells me that you missed a lot of blown assignments.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like you said, you can't attack them over the middle. And to me, Blake, this is where I think LSU can very much win this game. You can beat them throwing to the running backs out of the backfield, which is an extension of your run game. Clemson in all 4 of their losses, they gave up a running back reception of 20-plus yards. The South Carolina game, there was another screen for 17 yards to Rocket Sanders that really got that final touchdown drive going for them. SMU, there was a huge coverage bust on one of SMU's big red zone touchdowns to get them back into that game. Something else is Tom Allen's Penn State defense. In the games that they had some issues defensively outside of the Oregon game, they were giving up some passes to the running backs out of the backfield. And you look at those games, a lot of those running backs are similar profiles to that of a guy like Caden Durham, right? Guys that have home run ability out of the backfield. that can also catch the football out of the backfield. A guy like Bashal Tutin, who's now with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Massive reception in the first half of that game, where that Virginia Tech offense was very clunky throughout. So I think that will be the difference, right? Not necessarily throwing the football to the receivers, but like you said, throwing the football to the tight ends, and in particular, throwing the football to number 29, Leaking.
Well, and another thing, because I think Dabo brought this up like 5 times today. He said, listen, they got elite speed out wide with Chris Hilton and Barrion Brown and Aaron Anderson. He called Chris Hilton a rocket ship. He's like, we're going to have to be ready for them to force the ball down vertically. Carter, if they're going to do that, that means those safeties are going to back out. And Trey'Dez Green and Bauer Sharp have got to be open. And you got to get the ball.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like, it was and to add on to it, it's the worst thing they did as a team. Defending passes over the middle of the field. Why wouldn't you? That's the first thing I'm attempting. Like, hey, I'm trying to get Trey'Dez Green the ball in the middle of the field and see what happens.
And to your point, Blake, and we've had so many disagreements over Garrett. One thing that is without reasonable doubt true is Garrett is one of the best over the middle throwers of the football I have ever seen at the collegiate level when it comes to anticipation and pace on the ball. It is ridiculous. And I know most people, point to the Ole Miss game. The UCLA game was art in that aspect. So if there is one
UCLA.
thing, right? But it were still ridiculously difficult throws, and UCLA had 2 linebackers drafted in last year's draft. So I do think this your point here, throwing to the intermediate middle, could also decide it. Especially the benefit of throwing to running backs out of the backfield and throwing to tight ends is those plays tend to happen quicker. And the quicker the throw, the better it is for this offensive line in a tough matchup. Now, I got a question for you, Blake. How do you think this LSU offensive line lines up on Saturday?
I have no clue. I mean, I have some relative clue. I think it's Tyree Adams. I have no idea at left guard. Braylon Moore, Josh Thompson, Weston Davis.
No.
I just have no idea what they're going to do at left guard. And really and truthfully, I don't think Joe Sloan's pedigree, being an air raid guy, that he will stick with the run unless Brian Kelly gets involved. Or, a question that I've had myself all week is, how many times has Alex Atkins prepared for Clemson? When do you go down to his room and knock on his door and say, if you're Joe Sloan, and say, hey, what were all the things that worked on Clemson from a personnel standpoint that you guys hit on? Because he beat the shit out of us, and he called a great game against us twice. What worked against Clemson? I wonder, how much does that get involved? But Carter, the God's honest truth is, you go in there playing pity pat football, you're going to get your ass whooped. You can't walk up in there playing pity pat football. You're gonna get your cheeks clapped.
Got to buckle the damn chin straps. Maybe got to dig those heels in. They got their new
Garrett's got to run the football. I mean, I'm just being real with you. He's got to step up in that pocket and run, and then try to aim at somebody's fucking chin strap. Let's go.
You think Garrett is actually going to scramble in this game if given the opportunity? I think so too. I feel pretty good he's going to. And I think some of it.
And he's going to fall down like a flop fish on a boat in the middle of North Carolina like a big mouth bass. He's going to hit the deck, and I don't blame him. Get down.
Get down. Yeah, don't pull a Jackson Dart in the preseason game recently and get yourself hurt.
Right.
But yeah, I do think Garrett is going to run in this game, and I do think there's going to be instances where he has no choice but to. The thing is with the LSU offensive line being mostly really good at pass protection, as a quarterback, you're like, okay, let me just give myself a half second more. This offensive line, there's just going to be instances where their really good defensive line is just going to beat them right off the football. Garrett's going to be forced into a few scrambles, and that might actually be a good thing, right? Because it gets him into doing something that's somewhat outside of his comfort zone. So I do think Garrett's going to have a few.
Can you repeat that last part? You kind of broke up. Would you say?
I
You think
think
he's
Garrett's
gonna?
gonna have I think Garrett's gonna have a few 10, 15-yard runs in this game.
Ooh.
I think so. I would put the over under Garrett scramble rushing total for one run. I think he's gonna have a double digit run in this game. At least one.
I hope he does. I mean, it's the biggest thing here. Um, anything else that you think going into this game that we've talked about it a lot, but is there something that we haven't touched on that we need to talk about?
Yeah, Brian Kelly's under more pressure than Dabo Swinney to win this game.
I agree.
And I do think that plays somewhat of a role. It could be good or it could be bad. But it's not even close for me at all. Now, the funny thing about it, Blake, is this is a way bigger game for the ACC than the SEC. Like the ACC really needs to have this W. You know, Clemson at home, prime time. We can discuss the playoff format all we want. The truth is, I don't think the playoff committee wants to give the ACC the benefit of a doubt. And having what a lot of people consider to be the number 4, number 5 team in the SEC going on the road and beating your clear cut favorite team, it's not going to be something that's a death knell to the ACC, but they really need it when it comes to the playoff debate because the committee was pissed at what SMU did. The committee was pissed at what Indiana did in that playoff, and they want Alabama. They would prefer Ole Miss. They would prefer South Carolina, not only for a more competitive game, but a potential bigger brand name. So the ACC really, really, really needs Clemson to win this game. And one more thing, Blake, as we do move closer to this game, I want everyone to just enjoy this feeling, right? College football is changing so much. The conference format is going to change, all of that. But this is just crazy, right? LSU playing in Death Valley for this game. I just never would have thunk I would have seen LSU playing Clemson. I mean, this is just an iconic matchup, and we should cherish it. And you don't get home and homes, right? This has neutral site written all over it, right? You would think that this game would be played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but this is being played as college football should be played on campuses, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, either you're going to have one or two outcomes from a PR standpoint. Brian Kelly finally gets over the hump, wins a week 1, or you know what the other's going to be.
Are you in panic mode? Are you personally, Blake, Frederick, Theodore, Ruffino? Are you in panic mode if LSU loses this game?
I'm not in panic mode, but I do think that this game versus Clemson is a defining game in the sense of if you go out there and you win, you show people the moves that you made in the offseason worked. You show the development of Garrett Nussmeier. You show that Brian Kelly might actually have LSU on the right track. You get the 500-pound gorilla that everybody during the offseason, can 100 men beat a gorilla? Well, you get that big gorilla off of your back for once. You actually can defeat a gorilla. Okay. So you gotta get some level of respect. And I don't think that this program right now is respected as much as it used to be. But here's the thing. It's not feared. Not right now. You got to go strike the fear of God in them. Because I remember Urban Meyer, like, say whatever you want about Les Miles. Urban Meyer coming out and saying, dude, when we got off the bus and we saw LSU, we knew that we were going to get beat up even if we won. You got to continue to do that. That's what great teams do. But I think that this more than anything is a program definer from the beginning, from Jump Street. So who are you as a program? I think if you win, defines a lot. And if you lose, defines a lot because you know what it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And for me, Blake, I do think how LSU plays in this game will tell us a lot of who Brian Kelly is as a coach. Because, one thing I will say, outside of like prime Saban Alabama, LSU just rarely got blown out. You know, like I don't like getting blown out. And I understand for a lot of people, it's a black and white thing. It's either we won the game or we lost the game. But I think we can all agree that if you get your ass kicked, that is a sign of not good preparation or that your roster isn't where it needed to be or a mixture of both. Okay. For you to spend as much as you spent on this roster and put so much of your focus on Clemson, right? Having it be the only team on the schedule in the team meeting room when they scrimmage 1-0 on the jumbotron a few weeks ago. Um, you know, to have so much laser focus on this game and to get players from the ACC that has played against Clemson, get coaches that have played against Clemson. I can live with LSU losing this game. And I want everyone listening to your show to understand that Clemson is indeed a very good team. One thing that would be very hard for me to accept, Blake, is if we get our asses kicked. That just can't happen. There's just been too many blowouts versus teams that aren't teams you should be losing by double digits to. I understand we were up 17-7 versus Texas A&M last year. Never in a million years should you lose that game by double digits in the end, right? Where you just played horrible for one half after playing really good for the first. Um, Alabama, 42-6. Tennessee, all the way back in 2022. Was that team really good? Yes. You shouldn't have gotten blown out like that on your home field, even though it was that early in your tenure. You can excuse one or two of these or a few here or there, but I just don't want to see that. I can live with the close loss because this team is really good and we are going on the road and there are a bunch of new pieces, but I don't know how I would deal, Blake, with the 38-17 loss.
Do you think if LSU loses this game, they can make a playoff still? Like,
Yes.
or is it going to be a situation where you slip up in some games that you're not supposed to?
Yeah, so I have my full schedule here. We've gone over this. I've done 3 different iterations of how I think the SEC is going to play out. I look at a bunch of historical trends, back-to-back road games that I've used quite a bit, and I do have LSU at 9-3, and I do have LSU eking into the playoff at 9-3, and I do have LSU losing to Clemson and still making the college football playoff. With the SEC being the way that it is, if the ball bounces your way this year, yeah, you could still make it. Um, it's always going to be hard for any team with 3 losses to actually get into a 12-team playoff field. But I think that they can still make it. But it goes back to how they actually look in this game. If we know, and Blake, your audience of what, 400 people that are in here right now, 500, 600?
820 or 1,827.
Right. I was just looking at the YouTube numbers.
All right. No, we're on Facebook and Twitter too.
Right. If you look at what the committee has said, and knowing that last year, so much of how the playoff field was how many losses did you have, right? With there being a bunch of teams that many in the national media feel good about roster wise, take a school like Florida, take a school like Oklahoma, a school like LSU. Um, I think Blake, most sharp people, whether it's sports betting or football people, personnel people, they feel good about those rosters, right? You would like to think that one of those teams, as a competitive 9-3 team, is probably going to make the field, knowing that their schedules are as tough as they are. So, with us knowing that the SEC and the committee has admitted, hey, we're going to take strength of schedule more into the equation, I do think a subjective eye test could start to come into this playoff field, and that you could see a 9-3 LSU get in over an 11-1 Indiana or an 11-1 team from the ACC.
They've changed the playoff format, or not? They didn't change the format. They changed what they thought about teams the last 2 years. 2023 Florida State, and last year saying that wins are the only thing that matters. So I hear what you're saying, but I need to see them put a 9-3 team in that face a tough schedule before I'll believe it.
Dude, if there's anyone that is on a crusade about this, it is you. And I'm in agreement with you. I know this is our strongest disagreement, our biggest disagreement from our show last week. I'm fine with one automatic qualifier, but Indiana, I can't do that again. I can't.
You
I
can't
can't
do
do.
SMU again either.
Right. If you lose that conference championship game, uh, and you don't actually look impressive, because SMU did have a lot of just ridiculous wins. That Pitt game I still think about from time to time. Uh, you do feel a lot different about those schools. So I do have LSU at 9-3, and I do have LSU making the college football playoff.
So Clemson, and who are the other two losses before I get you out of here?
I have them losing the finale on the road at Oklahoma, and I have a loss at Alabama. So 3 losses on the road. I do think wins over Florida, Ole Miss, A&M, Arkansas, South Carolina. You would need a lot of chaos. Obviously, you would feel better if it's a win versus Alabama and maybe a loss to South Carolina or someone like that, because that would be a higher marquee victory, and it would also be later in the season. But I do think a 9-3 LSU will find a way to get in, a first timer. Let's go.
Just win game one. That's all I care about. All right, Carter. Thank you so much for joining us, buddy.
All right, buddy.